I didn't notice the ruins right away. At first, what caught my attention was a sound that had no place in the forest. It wasn't the call of a bird, nor the cry of a fox. It was higher, sharper, and broke into the silence with a rhythm that felt almost human. It made me stop on the path, my hand tightening on the strap of my bag as I tried to place it. The sound came again, thin, desperate, and raw, like someone crying, each note scraping against the still air like a warning. I stood still for several long moments, my ears straining, the world around me suddenly amplified. The hum of insects, the whisper of wind through branches, the distant creak of a tree trunk. Everything seemed sharper. But it was that cry, trembling and insistent, that pulled me forward. I stepped off the trail, branches clawing at my arms as I moved deeper into the undergrowth, guided only by instinct and the sound. The forest here was thick, heavy with late summer heat, the air pressing against me with the smell of damp earth, moss, and decaying leaves. As I pushed further, the outline of something unnatural came into view. Crumbled stone walls jutted from the ground, strangled by vines and roots. They looked like the remains of a farmhouse, or maybe a storage cellar long abandoned, forgotten by everyone except the forest reclaiming it. My steps slowed. The crying was clearer now, echoing off the broken walls in a hollow rhythm that raised the hair on my arms. It wasn't human, I realized with certainty. It was something small, trapped, terrified. I circled a mound of rubble, and then I saw it. A wide opening in the ground where the earth had given way, framed by jagged stones. My breath caught in my throat. At the bottom of the pit, tangled in fallen rocks and leaves, was a bear cub. Its fur was filthy, patches clumped together with dirt, and its small paws scraped hopelessly against the stones as it tried to climb. Each attempt ended the same. It slid back down with a pitiful cry that cut straight through me. It wasn't the growl of a wild creature. It was pure fear and exhaustion, the sound of something that couldn't go on much longer. For a moment I froze. Instinct screamed at me to retreat, to put distance between myself and the animal. Bears were dangerous, even the smallest ones. If a cub was here, its mother couldn't be far. The thought made my stomach twist. But then I looked at its eyes. They were wide, wet with panic, staring up at me in a way that was hauntingly familiar, like the eyes of a child desperate not to be left alone. Against all reason, I felt my body move forward. The cub wasn't my enemy. It was begging for help. I crouched near the edge of the pit, peering into its depths. It wasn't impossibly deep, maybe 10 or 12 feet, but far too much for the little one to escape on its own. The sides were sheer, lined with broken stones and slick dirt, every ledge crumbling at the slightest touch. One wrong move could mean another fall, another gash. My heart hammered, the sound filling my ears as I whispered quietly, though I knew the cub couldn't understand the words. My voice was more for me than for it, steadying me as I thought through what to do. The cub let out another cry, weaker this time, its body trembling visibly. The sound dug under my skin and broke something open inside me. I scanned the trees, every nerve on fire, searching for any shadow or movement that might betray the presence of its mother. But the forest remained unervingly still. Just the constant hum of cicadas in the distance and the ragged, frantic breathing of the cub rising from below. I pulled off my jacket and tied it around my waist, needing both arms free. My eyes searched for a way down, and I spotted a collapsed corner of the wall where dirt and rubble formed a slanted path. It looked unstable, but it was my only option. I tested it with my boot, and the ground shifted, small stones tumbling into the pit, but it held. I gritted my teeth, crouched low, and began to descend. One step at a time, gripping at roots and stones, sliding when I had no choice. The dust rose around me, clinging to my palms and staining my knees. My breath grew shallow, every muscle taut with effort until at last, I dropped the final few feet to the bottom. The cub flinched at my approach, shuffling backward until it pressed itself against the cold stone. Its eyes were wide, dark with terror, and a soft, throaty whine rattled out of its chest. It didn't bare its teeth or lash out. It was too tired. I crouched low, moving slow, speaking in a steady, quiet tone. My boots scraped softly across the dirt as I edged closer, my hands open and visible. I wanted it to know I wasn't there to harm it. For a few tense moments, we stayed like that, me crawling slowly forward, it trembling against the wall. Then, with a sudden, almost desperate lunge, the cub staggered toward me. Its small body collapsed against my leg, and I felt the heat and tremors of its weight. I lowered myself, sliding my arms carefully under its chest. It was heavier than I imagined, its muscles coiled with tension, but manageable. Its tiny claws hooked into my sleeve, not out of anger, but like a drowning soul clinging to anything solid. Getting out was harder than I anticipated. The slope that had helped me down became a traitor on the way back up. Each step sent rocks sliding out from under me, threatening to send us tumbling back into the pit. My arms ached from holding the cub close to my chest, my legs burning with the effort of pushing upward. The air grew thick, each breath a sharp pull as my heart pounded like a drum in my ribs. I paused halfway up, bracing myself against the wall, gasping for air. The cub whimpered softly, its warm body pressed against me as though urging me not to stop. With every ounce of strength I had, I forced myself upward again. My boots scraped, slipped, caught. My arms burned. And finally, with one last heave, I pulled us both onto solid ground. My knees buckled, and I dropped heavily, clutching the cub tightly against me as my chest heaved for air. The cub pressed against me, shivering violently. Its whimpers broke into short, sharp cries, then settled into a faint whine. I brushed dirt from its fur with a trembling hand, my fingertips running over the rough texture of its coat. That's when I noticed it. The fur on its side was clumped with dried blood. Along its shoulder, the skin was broken, torn where jagged stones had cut deep. A dark bruise marred its ribs, spreading like ink beneath the fur. Each breath it took was uneven, catching in its throat as though even the act of breathing caused pain. I froze. The cub wasn't just frightened. It was injured badly. My arms instinctively tightened around it, a protective hold I couldn't let go of. My mind raced with questions. How long had it been down there? How much blood had it lost? Could it even survive without help? I swallowed hard, my throat dry, heart still racing. Then, from somewhere behind me, a twig snapped. The sound was faint but clear, slicing through the air like a warning. My head jerked up, eyes scanning the trees, every muscle stiffening. The cub whimpered again, its small claws digging into my sleeve. The forest was no longer silent. The world had shifted, and I wasn't alone anymore. The cub lay in my arms, trembling against my chest. Its body felt fragile despite the surprising weight, every shiver making me hold it tighter. I could feel its uneven breaths through my jacket, short gasps that made me wonder if each one would be the last. I glanced down, and its eyes caught mine, dark, wet, wide with fear. For a moment, I didn't know what to do. My instincts screamed that I should put it down, walk away, and save myself before something bigger appeared. But leaving it here wasn't an option. Not after I had pulled it from that hole. Not after I had felt it cling to me as though I was its only chance. I shifted my weight, rising to my feet slowly, careful not to jostle the injured cub. Its whimpering grew louder for a second, then faded into soft, broken breaths that rattled like whispers of pain. My heart raced as I turned in a slow circle, scanning the trees. The forest looked calm, but calm could be deceiving. Every rustle, every creak, every snap of a twig could mean its mother was closer than I thought. I imagined her massive frame slipping silently through the shadows, her eyes fixed on me, and the thought nearly buckled my knees. I whispered, my voice barely audible, steadying myself as much as the cub. "It's okay. We'll get you somewhere safe." The words hung in the air, and I wondered who I was trying to convince, me or the little one. The sound of my own voice, however shaky, gave me focus. The cub let out a faint whine in response, and though it couldn't understand, the fragile noise gave me the push to keep moving. The ruins stretched behind me, their jagged stones and collapsed walls forming a half-circle around the pit. The air inside them felt stale and cold, and the shadows pressed heavily against the ground. Beyond that, the forest waited, dense and endless, branches knitted together like a cage. I thought about leaving the cub there and hoping the mother would return. But if she didn't come back soon, if the injuries got worse, it would die alone. My chest tightened at the thought. I couldn't let that happen. I adjusted my grip, hooking one arm under its belly and supporting its head with the other. The cub shifted slightly, releasing a faint squeal that pierced me. Step by step, I moved toward the faint trail I had left pushing through the undergrowth. Each branch scraped at my sleeves, snapping back into my face, but I kept my arms wrapped around the cub, ignoring the sting on my skin. My breathing grew ragged as I whispered again, hoping the repetition would calm us both. Almost there, just a little further. The weight grew heavier with every step, my arms burning from the effort. The cub wasn't large, but fear and tension doubled its weight in my mind. Sweat beaded on my forehead, dripping into my eyes, stinging as I blinked furiously. My back ached, and my shoulders screamed for relief, but I couldn't stop. The cub let out small, pained sounds, its claws clutching at my jacket, not tearing but holding like a child refusing to let go. I thought about the possibility of the mother bursting through the trees at any moment, but I forced the thought down. I needed to move, not freeze. If I froze, both of us would lose. Minutes passed, though they felt like entire hours stretched thin. The forest seemed endless, every direction the same wall of green and brown. I tried to keep my bearings, remembering where the trail curved, where the moss was thickest on the trees, where a fallen branch had blocked my step earlier. I whispered to myself, naming each marker as though reciting them would keep me grounded. The cub whimpered against me, and each sound drove me forward harder, as though it were pleading not to be abandoned. I paused, crouching for a moment in the cover of low branches. My arms trembled with strain, and I gently shifted the cub's weight to ease the ache. Its head twitched weakly, eyes half closed, and I saw how fragile it looked against the backdrop of the wilderness. Its breathing was shallow but steady, its body pressing against me for warmth. I brushed dirt from its fur, my hand trembling as I saw fresh blood seeping slowly from the cut along its shoulder. I pressed my jacket gently against the wound, holding it there with the heel of my hand, whispering again to keep calm. The cub let out a soft moan, then closed its eyes as if exhausted beyond measure. I swallowed hard, fighting the surge of panic. "Stay with me," I murmured, though I knew it had no way of understanding. The helplessness clawed at me, but so did something else, responsibility. I had started this, and now I couldn't stop. The cub's tiny body was pressed against me like a weight of trust one hadn't asked for but couldn't refuse. I pushed forward again, finally spotting the faint glow of sunlight through the trees that marked the meadow's edge. Relief washed over me as I stepped into the clearing. The open space felt safer, less claustrophobic, though also more exposed. Every sound carried farther, and there was no cover here if something charged at me. I shifted the cub in my arms, kneeling in the grass to check it again. Its tiny chest rose and fell, but each movement was labored. Its nose twitched faintly, and a weak cough shook its body before it fell still again. My own breathing slowed as I tried to think. What now? Where could I take it? Was I supposed to carry it all the way back to the village? Would it even survive the journey? My eyes darted to the horizon, tracing the slope of hills in the distance. The village was far, hours away on foot. My chest tightened at the thought of carrying the cub that long, with danger behind every tree. I pressed my lips together, fear clawing at me, but then I looked down at the cub again. It was too late to go back. I couldn't abandon it. The thought was broken by a new sound. At first faint, then clearer, a heavy crack of branches that shattered the false peace. My spine stiffened. I lifted my head, every muscle tense. The cub stirred weakly, letting out a thin whimper. The sound carried across the clearing like a signal, echoing against the silent trees. I held my breath, listening. There it was again, slow, deliberate steps pressing into the undergrowth. A sound heavier than any deer or boar, too controlled to be an accident. My heart thudded so hard I thought it might shake the cub from my arms. The air itself seemed to tighten, the meadow shrinking around me, every blade of grass a stage for something unseen. And then I heard it, heavy breathing, steady and deep, coming from behind me. My blood ran cold as I realized we weren't alone anymore. My arms instinctively pulled the cub tighter against me, though it whimpered in protest. I forced myself not to move too quickly, straining to listen. The breathing grew closer, filling the clearing with its weight. The hairs on the back of my neck rose. Whatever was there had found us, and it wasn't leaving. The sound of breathing grew heavier, close enough to stir the hairs on the back of my neck. I turned slowly, clutching the cub tighter to my chest. My legs felt weak, and the meadow seemed to shrink with each second. Out from the shadows between the trees, she appeared. A full-grown bear, massive, her fur thick and dark, her head lowered as she stepped forward. Her eyes locked on me immediately, and I couldn't breathe. The cub stirred, letting out a thin, pitiful cry. The sound cut through the clearing, and the mother froze. Her head lifted, ears twitching, her nostrils flaring as she caught the scent of her child. My arms tightened around the cub, though I knew it was the wrong thing to do. Every instinct told me to hold on. Every rational thought screamed that I should let go. For a long, unbearable moment, none of us moved. The bear stood at the edge of the clearing, her chest rising and falling with deep, steady breaths. The cub whimpered again, and she responded with a low rumble that rolled out of her chest. It wasn't anger. It was something else, recognition, desperation, a call meant only for her cub. My throat was dry, my knees threatening to give way. Slowly, carefully, I crouched lower, trying not to make any sudden moves. My hands trembled as I shifted the cub against me, whispering softly even though my voice shook. "It's okay. I know you're here." The words were nothing but air, but I needed to say them, if only to keep myself from falling apart. The cub shifted in my arms, and I felt its claws dig into my sleeve. It was too weak to fight, but it was aware. It knew its mother's voice. Its eyes fluttered open, and it let out another broken cry. The sound made the bear step forward, one deliberate pace into the meadow. The ground seemed to quake under her weight. My heart slammed so hard it hurt. I could see the details now. The scars along her muzzle, the shine of saliva on her jaw, the twitch of her ears as she studied me. She didn't charge. She didn't roar. She simply stood there, her massive body radiating both danger and something else, something that felt like hesitation. I lowered myself further until one knee touched the ground. The cub moaned, weak but insistent, and I realized I couldn't keep holding it. My arms were trembling from exhaustion, and every second with it in my grasp felt like a threat to both of us. I swallowed, my chest burning, and slid one hand under the cub's belly, preparing to set it down. The bear's eyes narrowed, and she took another step forward. My breath caught. I froze with the cub halfway between my chest and the grass. For a moment, it felt like the world held its breath with me. Then, gently, I placed the cub down. It whimpered, rolling slightly onto its side, too weak to stand. My heart ached at the sight, but I forced myself to back away just a little, my hands open in the air to show I wasn't holding anything anymore. The bear watched me, her ears flicking, her breathing louder now. She took another step forward, then stopped again, her gaze darting between me and the cub. Her body language was tense, her muscles ready, but she didn't launch herself at me. She waited. I stayed kneeling, every muscle stiff, sweat running down my back. My mind screamed at me to run, but I couldn't. One wrong move, one panicked motion, and it would all be over. I forced myself to stay still, to show her I wasn't a threat. My eyes flicked to the cub, lying in the grass, its chest rising and falling in shallow, painful breaths. The silence was unbearable, broken only by the sounds of breathing. Hers deep and steady, mine sharp and shallow, the cub's fragile and uneven. Each sound layered on the other, filling the meadow with a strange, fragile rhythm. She moved again. One step, then another. Each one deliberate, each one shaking the ground in my ears. She was closing the distance now, and with every stride my body screamed at me to flee. My pulse raced, my hands shook, but I stayed. I didn't know what would come next, attack or acceptance. All I knew was that the choice wasn't mine anymore. The bear stopped just a few paces away, her massive frame towering above the grass. My pulse pounded in my ears, and the air felt too heavy to breathe. The cub whimpered on the ground between us, its small body shifting weakly. For a moment, the world seemed balanced on a knife's edge, me on one side, her on the other, and the cub lying helpless in the middle. She lowered her head, nostrils flaring, drinking in the scent of her young. A deep sound rumbled from her chest, low and steady, a sound that made the ground vibrate beneath me. It wasn't rage. It was a call. The cub stirred, raising its head slightly, responding with a faint, broken cry. My chest tightened at the raw bond in those sounds. I stayed frozen, kneeling, my palms open in front of me to show I had nothing. Every muscle in my body screamed at me to run, but I forced myself to remain. One wrong move, one sudden motion, and it would all end in violence. I focused on the cub, using it as an anchor, watching the way its tiny paws reached toward its mother. The bear stepped forward, slowly, her weight pressing into the earth with each stride. She closed the gap, her gaze flicking to me, then back to her cub. I felt her judgment in that look, a warning and a question at once. My hands trembled, but I kept them visible, whispering under my breath without even realizing it. "It's yours. Go to your baby." The cub tried to rise, but collapsed again, too weak to make it the final distance. My heart ached as I watched it struggle, and then relief swept through me as the mother lowered herself onto all fours and reached it. She sniffed her cub, nudging it gently with her massive muzzle. The cub let out a sound I hadn't heard before, softer, more like a sigh of recognition than a cry of fear. It pressed its face against her fur, clinging as best it could. I let out a shaky breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. The bear stayed crouched over her cub, eyes never leaving me. For a long moment, we stayed like that, the three of us caught in a strange circle of silence and trust. She could have ended me in an instant, but she didn't. Her eyes were dark and unblinking, carrying both warning and something I hadn't expected, acceptance. I eased backward, slow and deliberate, never turning my back. Each step felt like a mile, the grass brushing against my legs as I moved away. She followed me with her gaze, but she didn't rise, didn't advance. She stayed with her cub, licking its wounds, making low, comforting sounds that resonated through the clearing. When I reached the line of trees, I paused, still facing them. The cub was nestled against her now, its body half hidden beneath her massive form. The danger was still there. She was still a wild bear, but something about the scene made my chest ache with a strange kind of peace. Our eyes met one last time. In that gaze, I felt both the enormity of the wild and my smallness within it. There was fear, yes, but there was also respect. For a heartbeat, I believed she understood, that she knew I had not meant harm, that I had only given her child back. I backed into the trees, branches closing around me until the clearing was just a patch of light between trunks. My legs shook as I turned and finally allowed myself to breathe deeply, the tension draining from me all at once. I leaned against a tree, my chest heaving, my mind racing with everything that had just happened. The forest was alive again, the sounds of insects and birds returning as though nothing had happened. But I knew better. Something had happened, something rare, something that would stay with me for the rest of my life. I had seen the wild not just as danger, but as family, as trust earned in the briefest of moments. As I walked back toward the faint trail that would lead me home, my arms felt strangely empty without the cub's weight. Yet I carried something heavier now, a memory, a bond, a truth I couldn't ignore. Sometimes, helping nature meant risking yourself. Sometimes, you gave everything without knowing if it would matter. And sometimes, in the heart of the forest, it mattered more than anything. That day, I left knowing I had stepped into a story that was never truly mine, but one I would never forget.